Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is Sunday, September 20th, 2009. We're rapidly approaching the end of the year. It's coming along faster than I expected. Lots of things to announce fairly quickly. I'll try and get this out of the way. This is a live, interactive television program that's normally on public access and will be returning to public access in the Austin area on October 18th. But right now we're doing it guerrilla style for my place. Taking calls over Skype. You can go to Skype, skype.com. Download the software, set up an account for free, and then add Atheist TV to your contact list. Send a message with your name, your location, and what you want to talk about. John is over there today screening all the calls. He'll add you to the queue, and as soon as we're ready to start making calls, not taking calls, we'll call people roughly in the order that they send us information. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sundays at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month when we have a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at 9th and Guadalupe. You can find out more about the ACA by visiting www.atheist-community.org. You'll find information there not only about the lecture series, but our other events, including Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays at the Dog and Duck, and the upcoming Bat Cruise, which is next Saturday. We do this once a year. Austin has the largest metropolitan bat population in the world, somewhere around 3 million or so, and we rent a boat downtown, go out for the evening, have some drinks and snacks and chat and have a good time with other atheists, and then just after sundown the bats come flooding out from their hidey holes, and you get to watch. It's pretty cool. We have a good time there every year. I'm Matt Dillahunty, your host. Joining me this week's Tracie Harris, the part that I skipped at the beginning. I'm sure Frank showed the names up there on the front. Frank is clicking like a madman to get different graphics up there. I love it. Last night was a special event sponsored by the Ethical Society of Austin, and Jen, the vice president of the ACA, was involved in helping to arrange this a little bit. Sean Faircloth, the executive director of the Secular Coalition for America, who is essentially our lobbyist in Washington. He represents 10 national organizations, including American Atheists, Atheist Alliance International, etc., to lobby on behalf of secular concerns. We went down to the Ethical Society, which they've been in their new place for 2 months, and we stopped down there, had some snacks. Sean spoke for about a half hour or so and then answered questions after that. It was a great talk. I was a big fan of Lori Lippman Brown when she did the job, and I personally am of the opinion that the Secular Coalition for America did a great job in selecting a new executive director. I was very pleased with what Sean had to say last night, and I think that he's going to be an outstanding representative for the secular community in Washington. You can find out more about him at the Secular Coalition for America website, which I didn't bother to give Frank the link, so just Google. We had a good talk. We went to Threadgills afterwards, had a conversation, along with some guests from San Antonio, including Paul, who is one of the organizers for the Texas Free Thought Convention happening November 14th. I think in the past I've said 15th, but I think it's November 14th. It's the Saturday, whichever day that falls on. So that's in San Antonio. You can find out more at texasfreethoughtconvention.com. I'm planning on going. I know Jen's going. I don't know how many other ACA folks are going, but we're going to try and get as many as we can down there to participate. So those are the events coming up. Also, Vic Stinger will be in town in October. As I would say a reminder, but this will be the first time I've mentioned this on this show. The October 4th episode of the Atheist Experience probably will not happen. That's 2 weeks from today, and we won't be back in the studio yet. We would still have been here, but I have another obligation that's going to basically shut down this studio. I apologize. I mean, we've done the best we can. What with the studio closure, bringing shows as many weekends as possible, but I have a real life too, and on occasion it's going to interfere. So that's what's happening on the 4th. And in addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. You can find out more at nonprofitsradio.com. That's PROPHETS. We were live yesterday. We would have been live again in 2 weeks, but I'm canceling all shows for that weekend. So the Nonprofits will be back on the 10th of October instead of the 3rd. And I think that's all the actual announcements I had to do. John, do I have any more announcements? How much space do we have left on the back cruise? Is it getting tight now?
It's Well, we have about 57, 58 people signed up right now. The boat can hold 120, but we won't be on the top deck at the same time. So it's getting full.
Then nobody could hear that. Somebody probably could, but it's starting to get full. So if you were planning on registering for the Bat Cruise, stop by the website and you can take care of it there. You can send an email. Next Saturday we're meeting at 5:00 at Threadgills on Riverside. You can park at One Texas Center right behind there. It's a parking garage, but it's freely available on the weekend. Then we're going to walk over to the boat and go out and have a good time. After that's over, some of us are going to get together and go to Esther's Follies on 6th Street, the 10 o'clock showing. It might be a good idea to try to get your tickets ahead of time if you're planning on doing that as well. And we look forward to seeing you, especially the people who are coming from out of town for the event. So it should be fun. Tracie, what do you have for us to discuss today? I know somebody prompted you based on something we talked about last time.
Yes. In fact, it was someone who had responded to Jen about a comment, I guess, on Martyrs, to saying that the Muslim martyr is not comparable to the Christian martyr, specifically the martyr that dies for a resurrection claim, because the claim is that the Christian martyr saw the resurrection, died for this claim that there was a resurrection, would not recant, and his death therefore demonstrates that he is convicted of that claim. And there is some, I think generally when an atheist is presented with the claim, the gut response tends to be, well, it's possible that he believed it, but it doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
But with regard to the Muslim martyr, there isn't this specific claim of, I saw this thing that's significant, and therefore that's why I'm willing to die. So they're saying that the differentiation between the Christian martyr and the Muslim martyr is one was an eyewitness to a resurrection, the other one is simply dying for a religion. That's the dividing line I'm saying is being criticized.
Although I'd say that I don't know that we have any reliable evidence that there were eyewitnesses who died as martyrs.
Yeah, and we'll mention that a little bit, but that's not really what I'm going to talk about.
Take it away.
I'll talk about it. I went ahead and posted the topic on the blog, and I printed out the blog post, and we're just going to kind of hit the highlights. The reason I posted it was because it's what I wanted to talk about, and so the article that's on my lap right now is my article. The very first thing that I discuss in it, the introduction, is a recollection of the story of the boy who cried wolf. And the reason that I utilize that story is, if most people are familiar with it, little boy being mentored, going to be a shepherd, gets to be a shepherd, he goes up on the hill, he's given a staff, he's told, if anything goes wrong, if you see a wolf coming to get the sheep, you're supposed to cry out, the villagers will hear you, and you will then sound the alarm, everyone will come and save you from the wolf. The little boy, gets left alone, the mentor tells him, don't abuse this, only call, about the wolf if there's really a wolf, it's not to be funny. So, sure enough, the little boy gets bored, sitting on the hill watching the sheep, and he calls wolf. And everybody comes running, and there's no wolf, and the little boy is laughing, and it's just the whole town is in confusion. And later the boy really does need help because a wolf really does come. He calls wolf, no one comes, the wolf kills the sheep. And the moral to that story is you should tell the truth because then people will believe you, and if you ever need them to believe you, it's good to have that kind of cred that you generally tell the truth. Whereas if you're known to be a liar, you lose credibility and people won't come and help you.
Makes sense.
My question about the story is, why, when we hear the story of the boy who cried wolf, does the story not confuse us? Why do we say, why don't we ask, why in the world did the little boy lie? Like, what was his gain? What did he benefit from the lie? Why would the mentor have warned him not to lie and told him only do this if it's really, important? Why would we relate to the little boy wanting to lie? Why does that not come up as a question? And the reason that doesn't come up as a question is because we understand very well why the little boy is lying. And it was funny because I asked someone the other night, what's the reason for the lie? And they said, well, he was getting his jollies. And I said, yes, that's exactly what he was doing. He wanted to see the town. He
had some power and wanted to exercise it to see what happened.
Right. He knew that he could control the entire town. He was bored, and this was for grins. And the only reason that I bring this up is to just demonstrate that we all can relate to the idea of lying for the sake of a lie and how controlling people with a lie can be a thrill. It doesn't baffle us that someone would do this. We relate to it, whether we would do it ourselves or not. We understand the motivation as being a very real motivation. The next thing that I brought up, because that's, it's a myth, obviously, but it speaks to the reality of something that we relate to. That's the only reason I mention it. Mm-hmm. With regard to the next thing that I want to mention is Munchausen by proxy, which is when people do things to make their children sick in order to get attention and sympathy from other people who they control with these lies. They make the child sick. They pretend the child is sick for some cause that they don't know. They pretend they don't know why the child is sick.
Right.
Then the child goes into the hospital, or gets worse. They're feeding it some kind of poison or doing something to make it ill. And all they gain from this is attention.
Yeah.
This is it. They gain attention. And they risk their children's lives, potentially giving them horribly poisonous substances that could kill a person in order to get this child into the hospital so that they can be pitied and get attention from their family and from their friends and from maybe some hospital staff.
It's sympathy and other forms of attention.
Clearly, if the world was reasonable, it would make no sense. A person with Munchausen by proxy, we would just reject that. If we were in a courtroom and someone said, this makes no sense, we would say, you're right, it makes no sense. No one would do that. I find her not guilty. But we don't do that because we know that there are people who do this.
Right.
As whacked out and lunatic as it seems to us, there are people living among us as normal segments of our society who are doing this to their children, and they have not been discovered yet.
Yep.
And they are sick people that we think of as not sick until we discover they're doing a thing like this. And then we say, wow, what a sick person. But they do it for attention, and the point to the Munchausen example is to say, number one, a person will harm or kill their child strictly for attention and lie about it. And number two, it doesn't take much of an audience for these people to do it. They don't have to have an audience of thousands.
Right.
You only need a few people to make it worth your while if you are this type of person. The next example that I brought up was the Salem witch trials. And I brought that up because you had a couple of people involved in that particular lie, where you had young women who were giving testimony and claiming that they were being attacked by witches, and they started naming people in the community. And of course, we know that that there were tortures administered to those people, and then there was coerced confessions, where these little children, though, they weren't too small to understand that people were being executed and people were being tortured. They were old enough to get that. We're not talking about a 4-year-old. We're talking about a child who, although they might be a minor, they're old enough to understand the idea that they really caused some harm to someone else. These children did not care.
Well, it may be the case, and I know we're going to get to this a little bit later, that they didn't have this realization completely until after it happened the first time. But then once it's happened the first time, now they're invested, and now they're having to protect themselves by continuing the deception.
But the point is, they're willing to lie in order to gain attention, and they don't care if it results in someone's death or someone being harmed horribly. Mm-hmm. They're willing to keep doing that, and that was multiple little children involved in that. And I think they ended up killing about 12 people as a result, if I remember correctly. But then we have to deal with the idea that there's a claim. Okay, there's a theist claim that's put forward, and I wanted to make sure this is put forward clearly, and I also wanted to do what I could to try to make it as reasonable as possible. I didn't want to misrepresent this claim. So I let theists make the claim. And the first person that I'm quoting from is a pastor, and it's Pastor Bobby Leggett in the December 23rd, 2008 Blanco County News Focus on Faith section, contributed an article called "Is the Bible Reliable and Valid?" And I quote a paragraph from him where he starts out and he says, "Nobody would die for a lie knowing it was a lie. Many have died for a lie, but they did not realize they were dying for a lie. They thought they were dying for the truth." The irony, I just want to break into that. The irony here is that when I first read this, I thought he was going to offer that, this was a possibility in the martyr stories in Christianity.
Yeah.
But oddly, he rebuts himself with a valid rebuttal, but never really ties it into the idea that this could apply to his own claim. He goes on to say, fact is, all the apostles save John were killed for their preaching. Some were speared to death, some were killed with a sword, some were beheaded, and some were beaten to death. Why is this a logical and reasonable validation of the New Testament? And pay attention, because this last sentence, he says, the answer is they had firsthand knowledge of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. Okay, so what he's really saying is that nobody would die for a lie, knowing it was a lie, and because these people died, and because he's saying they claimed the resurrection, that means that they had firsthand knowledge of the crucifixion and the resurrection. He is saying outright that the claim is true if you're willing to die for it, and you believe. If you believe it.
He's saying that the only reason these people would have willingly died is because they knew that what they believed is true.
Correct. He's not saying it's just that they were delusional. He's saying it was true. And then I have Timothy Minnick, who contributed an article to, it was actually a site called bigissueground.com, and it has an atheist section, but the atheist section posts apologetic articles from different religions. And in this particular article, it was contributed as a Christian apologetic of the same martyr argument that says the greatest testament to their honesty was the fact that they were persecuted under the Roman government and died for what they believed in. People may die for the truth, but nobody would die for a lie that they conceived. Okay, so he makes it a little bit more specific, saying that you wouldn't die for a lie you made up.
Yeah. Rather than a lie that... Well, see, that's the thing. The first complaint, or the first comment, and you pointed this out, where he says many have died for a lie, but they did not realize they were dying for a lie. Basically saying they sincerely thought that they believed the truth, even though it turned out not to be the truth. That's a valid possibility with regard to the various claims.
Right.
And he, of course, ignores it, chucks it aside, as you pointed out,
like,
to say that it must be true.
It's almost like saying everybody else's martyrs could have fallen victim to this rebuttal,
not these guys.
But not mine.
Yeah.
Mine not. No, I'm immune somehow.
And this guy goes on to, as you point out, to narrow it, that nobody would die for a lie that they themselves conceived, rather than a lie that was foisted upon them.
And the last apologist is a Reverend Dr. N. Graham Standish, September 7th, 2008. It's an online sermon, and at the blog I give his link. He says, "This is one of the reasons years ago that I decided the resurrection must have happened. Otherwise, who would die for a lie? These were people who had a passion for the message of Christ, who were willing to take up their crosses daily to spread the word, who go into strange lands, traveling hot and dusty roads with little money, into lands that are unsafe and where they could easily die a painful death. All for a lie? ? So his point is the resurrection must have happened, because who would die for a lie?
Yeah.
So they had to have been telling the truth, and the truth they were telling couldn't have been delusional. It had to have happened. That's this claim. I am not misrepresenting this. This is out of the mouths of an apologist. So I put down that according to, when I sort of churn this claim down and say, here's, hone it down, let's see what they're saying, I think it's a fair assessment to say they are claiming if a person knows their claim is a lie, such as a claim someone made up himself, it is impossible that person would die for it.
Now, if that's true, then that means that there are two possibilities. Everybody who dies as a martyr believes they're dying for the truth, and either they're correct or they're incorrect. And now, we're not accepting this premise. As a matter of fact, Tracie's getting ready to demolish this pretty much. The idea that nobody would die for a lie. But given their premise, their objection is that all martyrs, anybody who willingly dies, does so for something that they believe to be true.
Correct.
Okay? Even if that were true, that tells us nothing at all about whether or not they were correct.
Correct.
And in every single example here, from these Christians in particular, it is a matter of nobody would die for a lie, therefore it must have been true. No. You've got this non sequitur there. You don't think anybody would die for a lie, therefore they must have believed it.
Right.
You can't get from there to it was true.
Right.
And what they try to avoid this by saying, well, we're talking about eyewitnesses who witnessed this. How do you know? I mean, you have no reliable way of figuring out what anybody saw or whether how these martyrs died and what was in their mind at the time.
And we're going to
you don't know about the events that went on.
Yeah.
It was
absolutely. But I think that's a fair statement of their claim. If a person knows the claim is a lie, such as a claim someone made up himself, it's impossible they would die for it.
Yep.
I mean, that's what they just said. And I had to, in this blog post, give 3 examples right off the bat that contradict that and say, I will make these examples not like make them immune to addressing the claim. I'm going to say I can give 3 examples right off the bat where a person will die for a lie knowing it's a lie, but I'm going to say that I already know what the objection is going to be to them. So I will waive them due to the objections I know are coming, but I will also say that according to the claims as stated here, they rebut it. And this is the first one, coercion. And in coercion, this would be a situation where someone who knows you is being interrogated. They name you as someone who is running around preaching the resurrection. You get arrested, and they start torturing you, saying, confess you preached the resurrection. You refuse to confess that you preached the resurrection. They keep applying torture. And finally, to get them to stop, you say, okay, I was preaching the resurrection. I believe in the resurrection. I'm guilty. And then they, instead of being lenient and stopping torturing you, they sentence you to execution. In a case like that, you would be put to death on a claim of a resurrection, and you would have died for a lie that you made up, that you agreed to, at least a lie that they were accusing you of that you agreed to, and you died for it. The next one would be very similar to that sort of coercion, where you're being tortured, where you actually know that they will execute you if you admit to it, but you also know that there's nothing you can say that's going to get them to believe you that you weren't preaching the resurrection. So you ultimately just say, yes, I was preaching the resurrection in order to stop the torture and be quickly executed. Or even slowly executed. You want it to end. It's not going to end until you admit it. So you admit to what they're saying because they will not believe you. They think they've caught the right person, and they're not going to let you stop, and they're not going to stop until you admit it. The third situation would be one where someone reports to the authorities that a person in your house is preaching the resurrection. You know it was your child who was involved with Christians. You lie and say it was you. You're arrested and executed. You just became a Christian martyr who said there was a resurrection, who died for that lie. So, I mean, right off the bat, I can think of 3 rational examples where a person would do this, a healthy thinking person, not even a sick person, but a person who's thinking rationally would be executed for a lie regarding the resurrection. This can happen. It's not something that would have to require someone to be sick, and it rebuts the claims down the line. But I also understand that the claim of the martyr resurrection Christian story is that, well, they were out preaching that they were, talking about the resurrection. They got arrested for that. They were then asked to recant, and they were told they'd be executed unless they recanted. They wouldn't recant, and then they were killed. So they're going to say this is different than what we're claiming.
Yeah, in these scenarios, somebody is
kind of the opposite.
Changing what they've said.
They're admitting to it because of coercion instead of denying it. So I understand the objection, but I'm going to say if you don't accept these examples as analogous to what you're talking about, then you need to fix your claim because these rebut your claim.
Yeah.
And so you need to find a different way to state it because as stated, it doesn't work. So anyway, I ended up saying I'm going to list these examples as examples that show that the claim as stated doesn't work, but I'm going to throw those examples out. I'm not using them as my reason for saying someone would die for a lie. So after that, I say that in order to help you restate your claim in a way that's a little more reasonable, let's offer that nobody would voluntarily and without external coercion or pressure offer a false confession to a capital offense knowing it was false up to and including something he himself manufactured. And I think that's probably as fair as I can get. And does that sound reasonable to you? As far as the claim and how it would discount the...
Up to this point.
Yeah. Up to the claim, based on the examples that I just gave,
right.
to rule them out, you'd have to restate the claim like this.
Yes.
Okay. So
I think I'm getting ahead of you, but okay. I'll just sit here quietly and enjoy.
All right. So then I had a disclaimer in here, which is kind of what Matt's been, I think, chomping at the bit to get to. I was a little bit torn about making this blog post because I didn't want to give the impression that I'm accepting that there are claims where someone preached the resurrection, they were arrested for preaching the resurrection, and they were tortured for claiming a resurrection until they recanted, and they didn't recant, so they were executed. I do not mean to imply with this post that I'm responding to that because I think it's a real claim, like it's a true claim. I'm simply saying I don't even care if it's a true claim or not, because in the end, at the end of this post, I don't even think it's relevant whether or not there are such people.
Right.
But for the record, it was interesting because the only martyr I could really think of that I remembered ever reading personally was about Stephen, who was executed in Acts 6 and 7. There's a story about Stephen, and when I went to look that up to see, why was he arrested and what happened, and we need to understand this is like a very narrow subset of martyrs. This is only martyrs who could have lived during the time that the resurrection might have happened. They have to have claimed that they were there and saw it, or at least that they saw Jesus killed and then they saw him alive later. They have to have something that was in their claim that says, yes, I was an eyewitness to the fact that he came back from the dead. Then they have to have been executed only, in the situation that they would not have recanted. So we have to know that's why they were killed. This would be a very specific martyr that would demonstrate the truth of the resurrection if the claim was true.
Right. So
with regard to Stephen, he actually was killed upon claiming that it was the Jews who murdered Jesus. So he was martyred for claiming Jesus was murdered, not for claiming Jesus resurrected. And I just want to make that clear that we're not talking about a huge group of martyrs. We're talking about very specific martyrs for which we would need some very specific details about their trials.
There's a bit of inflation going on when people talk about this. They say, "Oh, you've got countless Christian martyrs," and claim number one is they couldn't have all been wrong. They couldn't have all died for a lie, and then they'll try to cite specific claims about eyewitnesses, and it's good that you're pointing this out, that of the potentially possible claims of eyewitnesses, there's this many.
Right.
We have this much evidence actually about this many, and yet they try to use this to establish a basis for that many.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing with Stephen that was interesting is
people listening to the audio, I made gestures with my hands that went from small to big.
It said that Stephen was actually arrested for lies, that somebody lied about him, and that's why he got grabbed. So Stephen wasn't even arrested for resurrection preaching. He was arrested based on false accusations against him, according to the story, and he was executed because he said Jesus was murdered. So there's nothing there that would be useful for a resurrection. To validate a resurrection from like Stephen's martyrdom. He would be a martyrdom that would be not a resurrection demonstration. So I started out then to say, okay, so let's look at that last claim, the one about, okay, you're not coerced, you're making up a story, you're dying for it, would such a thing occur? Would a person die for a lie they made up if there was no coercion? And what I found is that there's something called voluntary false confession, which is when you go in and you lie and you say I murdered someone, and you put yourself at, basically beg for a first-degree murder charge to be slapped against you. And people do this. They make it up and they go in and they say it. And when the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped and killed, there were over 200 people who threw themselves, forward to say, I did it. Right. I did it. I killed the baby. Well, obviously 200 people did not kill the baby. So who are these people? Who are these people coming forward to say, I want to be, arrested for a capital crime that I didn't do? And for what? What are they doing? I mean, these weren't all people calling in from asylums. I mean, these are people that were out, free people saying, I murdered this baby, and they didn't. So what in the world would motivate a person to admit to something they didn't do that's a capital offense, and there's no pressure on them whatsoever to do it? They're just simply making it up. Well, it's according to, what do I have here? The paper False Confessions, Why? Which is by Kathleen Dillahunty, and you can find it at the Williams College Psychology Department website. She says some false confessors have a pathological need for attention, and that's according to Saul Kassin, who's a PhD and distinguished professor of psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York and professor at Williams College in Williamstown, Mass. And he says it to explain confessions like John Mark Carr's. And if you recognize that name, or if it sounds familiar to you, John Mark Carr was a man who was living in Thailand and wrote to someone and said, I was there when JonBenet Ramsey died, and in fact, I can tell you it was an accident. And he basically started confessing to this murder. And the person that he was writing to turned him into the police. Why in the world would John Mark Carr claim to have been responsible for JonBenet's death or to be somehow tied to it? I mean, what would make a person do that? It was an unsolved crime. The police were desperate to arrest somebody. They were really out, just looking for anybody they could get their hands on. They flew him in from Thailand. They brought him in handcuffs, and the man was lying. He had nothing to do with it. He was just fascinated by JonBenet Ramsey.
Or he wanted a free plane ride
to the U.S.
I want out of Thailand. Let me confess to
Well, according to Cassine again, he says that's what everyone is speculating in the Carr case. The pathology is such that the need predominates, and everything else fades into the background. And Doheny adds, even the risk of prison or death. They are driven by the limelight, adds Eric Hickey, Ph.D. professor of criminal psychology at California State University, Fresno, and director of the Center of Forensic Studies at Alliant International University, Fresno. So this is obviously something that psychology is a little bit familiar with. And so we have described here people who are motivated by an insatiable need for attention, a lot like the boy who cried wolf. They just want attention. And so they start confessing to capital crimes because that's a quick way to get your name out there. And it doesn't take, like I said, a big audience. It can be a small audience to motivate these people.
Yeah, and I don't want to necessarily jump ahead because I don't know for sure if you mentioned this. In the specifics of Christianity, there is this encouragement that you're doing the right thing when people want to persecute you. When you're being persecuted, for example, I can't count the number of times I've heard it. Boy, the devil's really been working at me lately. I must be doing it right for Jesus, type of thing. Mm-hmm. That adds a motivator to things like this. A possible one. I'm not necessarily saying that people are lying. I'm just saying that, here are all the possibilities. And that's what Tracie's trying to do. Is let's go through and see what all possibilities are to determine how good of a case we really have. And yet, when you listen to the people who have accepted this and want to use it as an example of how ironclad their beliefs are, they have ignored all of this and just said, nobody died for a lie. Well, thank you for spending so much time in deep thought about this. I'm glad that you accepted the first thing that came along.
Right. And let's see. In a CBS News story, Alan Hirsch, professor of legal studies at Williams College, founder of the blog The Truth About False Confessions, stated, quote, as hard as it is to believe, there are just many, many false confessions for many reasons. So if I hear that someone confessed, my reaction is not, oh, they did it. In other words, he doesn't assume that just because someone confesses something that they're telling the truth, even if they're confessing to something they would die for.
This has gotten so common that I can probably remember a half a dozen occasions in the last maybe every episode of some crime shows where they have somebody in there who's confessing, and either it's a false confession,
right,
or the investigators go, we don't know yet. Did he do it? I know he's confessing, but he might be lying.
Right.
I mean, this is something that everybody has become aware of, and yet somehow the Martyrs must have died for the truth crowd are not aware of this.
It says, let's see, Hirsch goes on to say, voluntary false confessions can be motivated by a suspect's desire for notoriety. In high-profile cases, it is not rare for multiple innocent people to tell the police they're guilty. Another thing you'll find is that sometimes people confess to murders that never happened.
Yeah.
They make up that I killed somebody, and there's not even a murder. So anyway, in case I don't want to get just hung up on notoriety, because there's actually other motivations beyond just attention for why people do this. And there's one that says, in Doheny's article, in talking about voluntary false confession, Hickey also points out other confessors are angry and want to be heard. They want a voice. They don't feel like they have a voice. So it's just a way for somebody who feels like no one hears them to be heard. And while that's a lot like notoriety, it's a little bit different because it's more of an angry tone that says no one's listening to me, and so I need to do something to make people listen to me. And so it's a little bit of a different motivator. You still want the attention, but it's for a different reason. But Higgy says that he doesn't think that this is what motivated Carr. He thinks that it's possible that Carr wanted to be connected to JonBenet so badly that maybe he thought about it so much he fantasized himself into believing it. Cassine describes a situation where a person imagines an event over and over and becomes uncertain about whether it's real or not. In Dohany's paper, he says the memory research is clear on that. The memory research on this is clear. It's called imagination inflation. Basically, you tell yourself something over and over, and then you start to believe that it really happened.
And this is, I'm not being an expert, but this seems to me to be similar to what you see in cults.
Oh,
where
yeah.
There's this constant reinforcement.
Well, that's what I put here.
Oh.
I feel compelled to note that part of religious indoctrination and ritual is repetition, to hear the stories over and over.
I'm just going to be quiet because Tracie's got it all right here.
Well, anyway, yeah. I mean, we even had a caller where someone called in and said that he remembered a childhood vacation, and he was talking about it one day, and somebody in his family said, "You weren't even there." And he had just internalized all the stories. Like, he heard it so much that he had vivid, images of being on this vacation, and he was never there.
And I've had similar incidents. There's a group of friends who were in the Navy,
right?
And we have these really funny stories of people doing something stupid or saying something stupid. Whether it be something as inane as getting a song lyric wrong that was particularly funny, or doing something incredibly embarrassing. And having heard the stories a number of times, the players get swapped around. On occasion, somebody will be telling the story, and then Matt said, and no, I didn't do that.
Right.
That was Tim, or I'll think that Tim did it, and Sean will say, no, that was you.
And
dumbass.
you were all there.
Yeah. And we were all there.
Right. So, and then there's another motivation. Cynthia Cohen, I'm trying to see if I already noted her or not, describes something that she attributes this term to Paul Ekman, who is an eminent psychologist. He calls something duping delight. He says in putting something over on someone, they get a thrill, or Cohen adds, in putting something over on someone, they get a thrill. It's almost like someone who likes to bungee jump. Someone who has duping delight gets excitement from telling a lie and having someone believe it. Maybe they got rewarded for their tall tales in childhood. Perhaps their friends or even their parents thought the behavior was cute. And she does offer this as an explanation for voluntary false confession. Also, some people engage in voluntary false confessions because, this came from the chapter titled False Confessions, the Temple Murder Case, and the Tucson Four from the book The Right to Remain Silent by Gary L. Stewart, former editor of Arizona Law Review, who says that false confessions derive from several psychological conditions. A suspect may feel guilty about something he has done or failed to do, and something completely unrelated to the crime in question. So, in other words, you feel guilty about something else, and you confess to something you didn't do in order to be punished. Stewart talks about the frequency of these confessions. He says the frequency of false confessions is a vigorously debated question in the legal world. An even more complicated question arises in trying to determine how many wrongful convictions are based on false confessions. Estimates range from a low of 35 to a high of 840 annually. Now, to be fair, this includes any false confession, not just a voluntary one. So this would include coercion as well. Right. Police beat me up, and so that's what I said. Those would be tucked in there as well. But keep in mind that 200 people falsely confessed to Lindbergh's, murder. So, it wouldn't take much.
Kidnapping.
It was kidnapping and murder. The baby was killed. So, yeah. And anyway, all I'm trying to offer here, and this is what I say in the blog, all I'm trying to offer here is that based on what we know about reality, it is not unreasonable to reject the claim that nobody would voluntarily die for a lie if he knew it was a lie. Certainly there are people who would, and they're all over the literature, demonstrable. We understand some of the motivations that psychologically, push these people to do this. They're there, and they are not just a couple people. This is a lot of people. I'm not saying it's like the majority of people, but certainly it's not like so rare that it's unheard of. There's a lot of different motivators. There's a lot of people that come forward. People are still confessing to the Black Dahlia murder in Hollywood. Anyway, with guilt, that kind of struck me specifically because guilt is a huge factor in Christianity. So I wanted to talk about that just for a moment. Anybody would be hard-pressed to try and claim that people who feel unworthy aren't drawn like flies to a religion that preaches redemption that one cannot access through one's own worth. A religion that specifically reinforces a reality that all humans are wretched would offer a great deal of appeal in the form of of relation and identity to someone with deep-seated self-esteem problems. Someone recently referred to this as "I am the universe" fallacy on the TV list. The idea was that however I feel, whatever I think, whatever I do, it's the same for everyone. It's not a rare perspective to exhibit. I gave an example where I show up at a dinner party, I've got a chocolate cake, I put it on the table and I say, "Who doesn't love chocolate cake?" And the hostess says, "I'm allergic." You assume everybody loves chocolate cake because you love chocolate cake and your friends love chocolate cake, so everybody loves chocolate cake. Not everybody loves chocolate cake. Not everyone can eat chocolate. So it reminds you that there are exceptions to these things that you think are ironclad rules. And sometimes it takes getting hit upside the head with somebody who says that is the case. And in fact, one of the things that I talk about in this paper are the idea of, for example, if I didn't know it was true and someone said to me, nobody would live with somebody who beats them if they could leave.
Yeah.
I would say, of course. But I know that's not true. There are people who live with people who beat them and they can leave, but they are psychologically driven to stay. They are either afraid to leave. There's something about the situation that makes them stay in a situation that I can't conceive of staying in.
Yeah, the truth is, no rational person would stay in this situation provided they didn't have some other reason for staying in that situation.
Right, and yet we have these irrational people that, for example, they might not have children.
Or rational people who had a reason.
Yeah, like he'll hurt my children, I think, if I leave, or, I can't. So whatever. I mean, the point is, you can't just simply say this is unreasonable, and so it would never happen. Because the fact is, people do things that by all external visual accounts are unreasonable. Mm-hmm. People are not reasonable sometimes when you try to judge reasonableness by a material benefit. Sometimes it doesn't pan out. People behave in ways that are contradictory and hypocritical. And that was one of the things I mentioned in here, was the idea that the guilt motivation for a voluntary false confession is a way of punishing myself. It fits Christian martyrdom like a glove. If I think I'm a wretch who deserves hellfire and that I killed the uniquely good Messiah with my wickedness, then paying with my life while I witness to God would be the most glorious death imaginable. But would a Christian saint lie? Someone so devoted to God? Absolutely yes, if they were suffering from these issues. Good Christians have lied without gaining notoriety, redemption, or a rush. Every scribe that ever doctored a canon text to make it a little more orthodox is guilty of lying for the cause of Christianity. I'm sure they were aware it was dishonest, but a higher cause, a nobler goal was prompting them. The texts were revised. We have the notes in our Bibles today describing which passages have been added or altered from the older or better manuscripts. Quotes were fixed. Characters were made more consistent or gentler, but it was all to improve on the message for a greater good. So absolutely yes.
And you have Eusebius, one of the early church fathers, flatly stating that it's okay to lie if it serves the greater cause of, getting God's word out to people.
So I put, yes, people who subscribe vehemently to a doctrine will lie and die for it, even if the doctrine promotes honesty as a virtue. It's weirdly hypocritical and contradictory, but since when have religious zealots, or any of us for that matter, been immune as humans from hypocrisy or contradiction? Aren't these, ironically, some of the very flaws Christianity says we're all subject to? On that note, how ironic that an apologetic would be built around the idea that a human being couldn't possibly act in a way that makes no sense. We see it all the time. The Bible condemns us for it and calls it a sin and fault. I call it being human.
Yeah, they have attributed these martyrs with a character that they deny in everybody else.
Yeah, that they say doesn't exist, which is why you need salvation.
Yeah.
Would a reasonable person die for such a lie? No. But since when are humans, even most humans, reasonable? Where in the world was that fantasy bred? Other possible motives, according to, who do we have here? Richard Conti, Ph.D., Department of Psychology, College of St. Elizabeth, Morristown, New Jersey. In his paper, The Psychology of False Confessions, other possible motives for voluntary false confessions include an unconscious need to expiate guilt over previous transgressions through self-punishment. I can't pronounce it. It's some kind of Nordic researcher's name.
Good Johnson.
Thank you. Johnson points out that a previous transgression can be either a real or imagined act. He further states transgression does not necessarily have to be identifiable. Some individuals have a high level of generalized guilt which is not related to a specific transgression, and this may influence a range of their behaviors, including their need to volunteer a false confession. I'm not going to get into this next part too much, but I do want to point out that according to Craig Bunnell, in his paper Voluntary False Confessions and Overview, he points out that guilt is linked to depression, which is a well-known psychological problem that impacts loads of people. I don't know that there's anybody that doesn't have a friend or a family member or knows someone who's depressed or has depression. And I'm going to pull some quick quotes out from him. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I've got quite a substantial amount pulled from there. But it says, one of the things he says that's relevant is, in the case of falsely confessing to a crime they did not commit, this punishment comes via fines, prison sentences, even death. He also says the individual has a pathological need to become infamous, even if it means having to face the prospect of punishment. And he says, he's the one that said, quoted Johnson saying, perhaps even confessing to crimes that do not exist. And then in the end, he says, this is not to say that research hasn't identified observable behavioral differences between truth tellers and deceivers, only that the ability of people to recognize these differences is not very impressive. And this led me into something else, which was the idea that I can recognize when someone's telling the truth.
And I don't know if this dovetails into it, but talking more about the martyrs real quick, there is a presumption that we know the minds and thoughts of the people who died, so we know why they actually died. It may be the case, and this is purely hypothetical and it's drawing from several different aspects, that here is an individual who, let's say, knows that what he's been preaching is not accurate, but believes that it is in everyone's best interest that they believe it. Believes that it is important for people to accept this, even though it's not true, because he has a strong belief that not accepting this would be worse than accepting it. And therefore, this person may willingly go to their death, refusing to denounce something that they know to be untrue, because they think there's a greater good in people believing this, despite the fact that it's not true, or in cases where they may be doubtful, they believe that there's a greater benefit in people accepting this, even if it may not be true. You don't even have to work very hard to find examples why somebody might willingly die, not for a lie, but professing a lie. They're dying for they're always dying. In this case, in this martyr example that I'm using, they're dying for something they think is true. It's just that you don't know what that is. They're dying. I'm not all the examples.
No,
they're dying for a belief that is not the belief that you think that they're dying for.
Yeah, and I just want to add that not a month goes by that we don't get at least one, if not more, people writing to us to say, I agree with you, religion isn't true, but I mean, isn't it good? Isn't it a good thing? Isn't it helpful? So there is this, idea that even if it's a lie, it's still helping people. So maybe you should just let it, it's helpful to people. So what Matt is kind of saying is, suppose you had somebody that was like strongly of the opinion that this is, not just helpful to people, but necessary for people, to do something like be good, be moral people. Then, there's a possibility that person would say, this has to be demonstrated.
That in conjunction with the public investment.
Right.
I mean, I can tell you right now, I have no interest in being a martyr.
Right.
Some nut job gets me and puts a gun at my head and says, tell me you believe in Jesus or I'm going to blow your head off.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus, he's my buddy.
Yep.
And it's because this is a situation where it doesn't really matter. It's the best course of action is for me to do whatever it takes to prevent me from dying. There may be other situations where martyrdom, the same scenario with an addition, where martyrdom actually becomes viable. Where somebody, now you're in public on TV at the Super Bowl, and you're in the same situation, what do you do? The more publicly invested you are in something, the more likely you are to defend it, whether it's true or not, whether you are justified in that belief or not. And you'd have to say that that would be the case for somebody who's been publicly preaching something, all over the place.
But what's funny is, even in a highly public situation, if you had a gun to your head, I mean, to me, it wouldn't even be, I wouldn't even need to think twice, you know what I mean? Because who would think that you were telling the truth if someone had to put a gun to your head to make you say it?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're lying. No, so, I mean, there wouldn't even be, to me, in my mind, the prospect that someone would say, "Oh, but you said it."
Yeah.
It's like, what kind of an idiot is going to think that because I said it with a gun to my head that it must therefore be true?
Yeah. It's the reason why we don't take confessions that are made at gunpoint. That's
why we shouldn't torture, maybe.
If I'm there at the Super Bowl, if this is your master plan to kidnap me and take me to the Super Bowl halftime show, put a gun to my head and get me to say I love Jesus, I'm going to say I love Jesus, and then I'm going to fuck with your head until we are the best friends, and then I'm going to knock you the hell out and make sure that you're arrested, and I'll say, whew, yep, I lied. Because you know what? Lying isn't always the wrong thing.
Well, yeah, and the point is, too, the weird thing to me is that as a Christian, you're expected to be imperfect, and so if you did tell a lie, the whole point to the religion is that you can be forgiven for it. You might lie and feel really bad about it. I'm sorry, but someone had a gun to my head. I didn't want to lie, but, God, I got scared and I lied. And so, Jesus, please forgive me, and then you're forgiven, and guess what? You get the same reward whether you're martyred or not, so what is the point? And let's see, then I go on to the CBS News story, that one that we mentioned earlier. Hirsch says in that the rule of thumb is that everybody does overreact to a confession. There tends to be an assumption that it's true. And there were some disturbing things that I found when I was looking in the research for this. And one of the things that was really disturbing was that when you ask people, would they be influenced by a confession that they knew was coerced, or was potentially coerced, that there was good reason to believe was coerced, they said, no, I would discount that. But when you do mock trials and you present evidence, and then you add to that evidence a coerced confession that you tell them was probably coerced, they find the person guilty more often. People say, I would know that if it was coerced, I shouldn't use it, and yet the juries seem to be influenced by even a coerced confession. That's how hard a confession hits our brain.
Yeah.
We believe it, even if we have reason to think it's false. The other thing was, if a person confessed, right, let's say I confessed and there was no evidence of coercion, but someone presents evidence to show that my confession is false. Like I say I killed somebody and someone says, no, here's pictures of you at a nightclub at the time of the death. Okay, so I'm confessing to this. I'm not claiming it was coerced, but you're presenting evidence that shows I've got to be lying. Juries will believe my confession. It's crazy. People believe confessions. If someone confesses to a thing, people are prone to believe it, and it's hard to accept that about humanity, but it seems to be demonstrable.
And it's another example of how we rely on inference and induction, because most of the time it's useful. Most of the time it's correct. Most of the time today is pretty much going to be like yesterday. Most of the time, if somebody's confessing, they're probably telling the truth.
Right.
I mean, there are specific examples, but the grand statement that this is always the case, nobody would knowingly die for a lie. Well, yes, actually they would.
And the other issue that came up that was really disturbing was that there's a negative correlation between how well you think you can tell between a true and false confession versus how well you actually can.
Wow.
People who think they're good at judging whether someone's lying to them or not tend to be not as good as people who aren't sure. Wow. And there were actually, it was a study where they used, I'll go ahead and skip to it real quickly. It was a study where, it was called I'd Know a False Confession If I Saw One, a comprehensive study of college students and police investigators. So they pitted college students against police investigators. Police investigators more often were likely to say, I can tell when somebody's lying. The police investigators and the students looked at both video and audio of confessions issued by really convicted criminals who told the truth about their they confessed to the crimes that they actually committed on tape. They submitted those. And then they also gave scripted confessions that were lies and said they did these crimes, but it was actually convicted criminals who presented the confessions in both cases. And according to the data, and I'm going to read this, it gets a little bit, I'm going to skip some of the numbers, but I've got it at the blog. Across participants, conditions, and items, the overall accuracy rate was 53.9%, a level of performance that is both unimpressive and non-significant relative to chance performance. So you could have just gone through and just not even watched the videos,
right,
fingered them and said, true, false, true, false, true, false, and you'd have done just as well. That is really frightening.
Yeah.
And the other thing was that that's when they mentioned that, interestingly, judgment, accuracy, and confidence were negatively correlated. So the more confident you were that you had picked the correct confessions over the false ones, the worse you did. And it was the investigators who were more likely to feel confident.
I wonder if Fox will use that statistic on their show Lie to Me.
I don't know.
But
it was a little bit disturbing. And then, let's see. So in conclusion, basically what I've decided is that I see two really strong reasons why this apologetic is not going to go down without a fight. And the first one is the I am the universe fallacy. And it's saying, I am not the type of person who would die for a lie. I don't know people who would die for a lie. Therefore, nobody would die for a lie. Even though we can easily demonstrate some people would face execution for a lie, and that's a realistic claim, it's simply hard to get people to accept. It's a big world out there with a lot of diversity, especially if you're into a religion where diversity is condemned and conformity is rewarded and constantly reinforced. Who hasn't heard that atheists don't not believe in God? They know there's a God, they're just being defiant. We hear that. We hear people simply telling us that, you're saying you don't believe it, but you really do. And if a person is that, I don't even know what to say. If they're just simply that sure that nobody could think differently than they can, then there's nothing I can say. I could give them a mountain of data. It's not going to change their view. This person's not rational. So,
and the funny thing is that they are implicitly accusing you of being dishonest. And yet, if you suggest that you don't accept their claim, even without an implication that they are being dishonest, for example, there are many Christians in my life, in my family, and my friends. When they tell me what they believe, I don't think they're lying.
Right.
I believe that they believe this by and large. In some cases, I don't, but there's specific examples for that, and it's because your actions speak to what your true beliefs are. But I don't think they're lying. And when you say I don't believe that, you're not saying, I don't believe you really believe that, usually. You're saying, I do not have the same belief that you do. And boy, do people get pissed off, because in the same sense that confessions are so important to us, testimonials, which is what a confession is,
right,
are important to us. And when somebody tells you something that they believe and you don't take them at their word, you've questioned their integrity. Okay, in some cases I am questioning your integrity. Right. In some cases I'm questioning your sanity. In some cases I'm questioning your intelligence or your ability to think critically. In some cases I'm questioning my own thoughts about this. And in other cases okay, you believe that. Good for you. Where's the
Yeah.
What reason should I have to believe it? Because I'm sorry, your word alone is not sufficient.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I think you're a liar. Just that ain't enough.
Anyway, what I put in here is, I hope to have demonstrated the claim nobody would die for a lie can absolutely not stand unchallenged in the face of demonstrated voluntary false confessions. Nobody would die for a lie is along the same lines as arguing no woman would stay with a man who hits her, and we already discussed that, so I won't get into it. But it's that idea. It doesn't make sense to me, therefore no one would do it. Well, that's crap. There's a lot of things people do that don't make sense to me. It doesn't have to make sense to me to be really happening. And the other thing I think that's going to keep this from dying is that we put a high value on confessions. We think we can tell when someone is offering us an honest or dishonest confession, even though we really can't. And the more we believe we can, the more likely we can't. So all a martyr has to do is make a confession. Right off the bat, some people will believe the martyr simply because people believe confessions. Then, even if it's a lie, a lot of people won't be able to tell, but will feel confident they know the confession is true. In one article, it noted some people, and I've said this, people will convict on a confession of guilt even when confronted with compelling evidence of innocence. Our brains simply like to believe confessions, and the apparent validity of the confessions and whether or not it correlates to the evidence to an uncomfortable degree is irrelevant to our brains.
Yeah.
Simply stated, a whole lot of people tend to believe what other people confess too much and for horrible reasons, or even for no reason at all.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all I got.
And I'm sure we got a ton of calls waiting. John, you can go ahead and get the first one lined up. I'm taking a drink from my iced tea.
She's already on.
Cool. Juno from Los Angeles. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Anyway, I didn't get a chance to listen to the nonprofits yesterday yet.
Why not? What is your problem?
Well, work.
I understand that completely. I'm just teasing. Go on.
Anyway, this week I saw a video on YouTube about Ray Comfort and the how he's written a foreword for The Origin of the Species.
Yeah.
And he's going to be releasing it on November 19th, I think, passing it out at the top 50 campuses across the United States and stuff. I was wondering, have you guys heard of this? Have you
heard about it, read about it, ranted about it? Glad you brought it up. For everybody watching, Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron from the Way of the Master series have arranged to have 50,000 copies. Oh, no, wait, it's gone up to 100,000 copies now, I believe, of Darwin's Origin of the Species printed, with a new 50-page, and maybe longer at this point, introduction from them. And this introduction basically is them saying, here's this book, none of it's true. They make the claims that there are no transitional forms. They make the incredibly stupid arguments like, do you think this book just came together, that ink magically fell down and formed English words, etc.? Well, that's the kind of thing you'd have to believe what's in the rest of this book. It is just anti-science crap of the highest order. Every time I want to try to give Ray the benefit of the doubt, he does something more stupid, more, in my view, evil than he's previously done. The good news is that he announced this early enough that there are groups trying to take action, and they're not trying to take action to stop him. He's well within his rights to do this. Here's the action that needs to be taken. If you're a college student, be aware of whether or not this is happening on your campus in November. And if so, go down there and get yourself a copy, or a copy for you and a friend, or a copy for you and a friend and a roommate, or however many copies you can possibly get, and then rip out that introduction and give The Origin of the Species intact to libraries or somebody who needs them, or keep it for yourself for reference. Feel free to read the 50 pages, but I mean, this is like...
or one thing you could do is put your own criticism in the marginal notes and then donate it to a library.
Yeah, highlight the problems in there. Oh, no transitional follows? Here, go to this web link. All right, here, go to this site.
Yeah.
Or, what about this, put
100,000 critiques of creationism distributed to libraries everywhere.
Handwrite in,
with a free copy of Origin of Species attached.
Yeah, definitely.
Although that's a lot of work to go in and handwrite that in 100,000 copies. So, by and large, most people should just rip it out.
Well, if I get my hands on one, because unfortunately I just graduated from college, but I have a roommate that's still there. I'm going to ask her, or if I haven't looked at the list yet, I'm going to see if I can get a hold of one. And I have a YouTube channel, and I actually made a video about this. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. And if I get a hold of it, I'm going to do something with it. I want to get creative with the first 50 pages, that is. I don't know what yet.
Well, you can get a head start on this, because you can go online to Living Waters Ministry and view the introduction. They've posted it in its entirety as a PDF. So you don't have to wait for
sent me a link to it, but I haven't had a chance to take a look at it. I want to take a look at it, because also I remember, I think it was an episode or two back on the nonprofits, someone mentioned about where to find Ray on a Saturday afternoon, and actually after I heard that, I went down to try and look for him with my camera to see if I could see him, and actually there were people filming down there. However, it wasn't him. They were filming something else. I was bummed. I haven't had time to go back down there, but I really just want it. It's like, ugh, see just to see this stuff, because to be honest, I haven't really met many of the fundamentalist types in reality. I have through YouTube and stuff like that, but not like face to face. I grew up in kind of like a casual Christian type household without, not much religion involved, even though I went to a Catholic school for 13 years and saw my fair share of crazies, but, it's just, I don't know. But another thing I wanted to mention before I go is, again, I don't know if you've heard this about this, but Eric Hovind recently, they made a video saying they needed $170,000 to save their dinosaur adventure park. And apparently, I haven't seen the video yet because I've just been working nonstop, but apparently they got the money. I thought that was seized a long time ago now. If they can raise $170,000 in 2 weeks, why can't they, I know they've had a lot of the assets seized and stuff, but why can't they, pay back the debt? Because it's like, close to $500,000 that Kent owes, right? Something like that?
I don't know.
Up to the courts, right?
And at this point, with him in jail, paying back what they owe may not do anything to get him out of jail. I don't really know, but yeah, as far as I know, the assets were seized. I can't imagine what that money's going to do to recover it. Maybe they have a way of buying it back. I really don't know. It's just all in the unbelievably silly category to me.
Totally
right down to the name, Dinosaur Adventureland. It's okay. Boy, that almost sounds like it might be a fun park, and I'm sure there are some kids who are like, "Oh, I want to go to Dinosaur Adventureland." So that part, that's
just the name makes me want to go.
Really?
A Dinosaur Adventureland?
Maybe it's because I'm biased because I know what it really is that I don't want to go.
I love dinosaurs.
It's I don't get one. Maybe it's because I already know. I don't get the feeling of, hey, this is like Jurassic Park. I get the feeling of, oh boy, this is like, the Flintstones meet Jesus.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying I wouldn't be disappointed. I'm just saying the name alone, I'd want to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, you guys been great. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks for waiting. Thanks for waiting. John, go ahead and queue up another one, and I'll remind everybody that after the show's over here in about 22 minutes, or actually 21 minutes or so, we're going to get together for dinner. And since we're way up north in Austin, we're going to Pluckers at Lakeline. We'll get there. The show's off at 6. We'll get there about 6:30. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come. You don't have to be a member. If you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. And please try to get there as close to 6:30 as possible. It's okay if you come in late, but because we never know how many people are coming, it's not like I can call ahead and say, yeah, we're going to have 12 or 15 or 20 or 3. I think we'll probably have more than 3 just from the folks here. But if we gather there at 6:30, we tell them how many we have and try to save room for 1 or 2 extras. But it won't be long before we'll be back in the studio downtown and probably going back to Threadgills after the show. So who do we have?
We have Max in New York.
Max in New York, you're online.
Hey, Matt, Tracy, how are you guys doing today?
Good.
Very good, thanks.
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Good. I'm a big fan. I used to be a fundamentalist until about 1 year ago, and your program really helped me to learn more about atheism and stuff like that. But I basically had two questions. First question is, like, a lot of people say that religion, like Christianity in particular, and evolution are compatible. Like, there's both people, a lot of people that can believe in both, but it just doesn't sit right with me. I mean, what kind of loving God could create a system where, like, every second we speak, there are thousands of creatures that are dying and starving and stuff like that? You'd think that a loving, perfect being could develop a much better system than that to develop life. And it's mostly my moderate Christians friends that think that. And secondly, the reason why it took me such a long time to ditch faith is because I used to be in a pretty fundamental church, and I saw a whole bunch of people like talking tongues and mainly like being affected by demons and stuff like that. And I thought, man, no people could really fake that stuff. And I was just wondering what your view on people like that who think they're affected by demons, and when they have to be exorcised, they were weird, so crazy. And that's it.
Okay, sure. On the first issue, I see your point. I agree. I don't think that it's necessarily an evolution creationism conflict. You're talking about something that's more akin to the problem of evil. But there is the idea of what kind of God would create a world like this. I agree with you. It doesn't make sense to me from a scientific standpoint to have evolution and creationism coexist. But some people do it, and they do it by basically ignoring everything about creationism that doesn't fit with science.
Yeah.
And other people do it by ignoring everything about science that doesn't mesh with their creationism.
Yeah.
On the issue of speaking in tongues and activities that we would look at as possession or whatever. The fact of the matter is, people can fake it. People do fake it.
They've told us that they used to fake it.
Yeah,
but there's other people, I'm pretty sure, that believe it.
There's a number of different, both psychological disorders and just mass hysteria, the phenomenons of crowds and stuff. But this isn't constrained. If we didn't even have any other evidence, we could identify it because it's not constrained to any one religion. You see this in, voodoo rituals, and you go around and people get into a hysteric state, and they're falling around on the floor and flopping and, yelling and screaming and acting. I don't know. You'd have to review each case individually to try to determine exactly what's going on. But there's no reason that I can see to think that these events are what particular religious people are claiming them to be. And I think that if we actually went through and did a proper set of tests, like you took 35 people who claim to be possessed, and you let them know that, okay, we're going to cure you by having people surround you and pray, and then we're going to fling holy water at you. How many of them get better with holy water, and how many of them get better with tap water? And by the way, can you tell the difference between holy water and tap water? I know you can't with homeopathy, but that type of thing, if it was possible, if somebody actually took the time to study it, my suspicion is that we'd find that there's nothing there. And the fact that, people are willing to claim this before, maybe there have been studies, but, I'm not aware of any studies that confirm that this is supernatural. So that means people are believing it either without sufficient evidence, without the studies to confirm it, or in direct opposition to studies that would disconfirm it.
Right.
But
yeah, and basically why I hold on to my faith for so long is that I saw so many good people, and they were telling me that that was true and those experiences were real, and I just couldn't conceive that they would lie to me. But I understand that people can lie to themselves in order to hold on belief. But anyways, thank you for your show. It helped me a lot in my journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Max. It's always good to hear. We're all guilty. I mean, this is what humans are. We are evolutionary prepared as children to just listen to authority figures, and it's a good thing. Your parents are definitely more wise than you when you're an infant, and this carries on through adulthood. You want to trust people.
Yeah.
You want to have a good relationship. You don't want to think that they're lying to you.
And your brain believes confessions.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a quick question that's off topic a little bit.
Sure.
Somebody had posted something at the blog in the comments section, and I just wanted to clarify it because they said, they were kind of debating your stance on something, and I said, I think they've got to be wrong. If I put forward claim X, I say X exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you say, I don't have a position on that. Is it fair to say you do not believe X exists?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I needed. I said that is what Matt would say.
I'm happy to vindicate. Look, odds are. Okay. Tracie is like my sister. And odds are if she says that this is what Matt would say, she's usually going to be right.
And I just want to say this was not staged. He had no idea I was going to ask him that.
Which is why it took me so long to think through it.
Yeah.
And actually, I gave kind of an example of this yesterday on Nonprofits when we were talking about, in some cases, we're forced to just accept the opinions of experts because I can't possibly be an expert on everything and I can't possibly research everything in total. But I can only say that I accept the word of experts with regard to things that I have some grasp on. So while I'm not a biologist, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, I have some understanding of the process, and I accept what I get from experts, provided it is consistent and...
but just to say, they were taking a statement that you had made that you had no position on something. I think it was dark energy or dark matter.
This is what I'm getting to.
And they were saying, therefore, Matt does not believe it, and he does not believe it. And I said, no, that means Matt does not believe it.
That's exactly the point I'm getting to.
Thank you.
This comment was made yesterday about dark energy, and that is that while I am forced to rely upon experts, I don't have a sufficient understanding of dark matter, of dark energy, to accept the expert's view on it. What does that mean? It means I do not believe that dark energy exists. That doesn't mean I believe dark energy doesn't exist. That's a different thing. Right. And it doesn't mean I believe the experts are lying or stupid or wrong. I just simply don't have a sufficient understanding of it to say I accept what they're telling me as true. That's it. Yep. Who's next, John?
We have Enrique in California.
We have Enrique from California.
All right. Yes, you do.
Hey, how are you?
Am I on?
Yeah.
Yes, you're on. How are you?
I am fantastic. I
bet you are.
Just one thing. I've been seeing you guys for months, and I become a big fan. Matt Dillahunty, you are hilarious, man.
Well, thank you.
I hope that's good.
I try to be a little funny on occasion.
I hope it's on.
Hopefully, I'm not hilarious. Yeah, hopefully, I don't think I'm hilarious when I'm being serious. But so, what'd you have for us today?
No. When you're being serious, you're being poignant, and you make me think at least. I don't know if you'll make some of the Christian callers think. But
well, thank you very much. But I don't want
to like enough sucking up because I am very excited to call. Oh man, to where to start?
Well, we're short on time, so you're going to have to start.
Yes. Just a second, okay. Let's see. I remember. I always remember how you said one time how you said that the God of the Bible is a complete dick.
Yeah,
and I've always agreed that, and I've always wondered why would a loving God be like that, as one of the previous callers was talking about. But I was just thinking of how I once played a game, or actually I played a couple of computer games where you basically play God, and in those games it's really, really fun to be an evil God.
Yes, it is.
Be a dick.
Yes, it is, and also. I would say that in those types of games, and not just the being a god character, but any character any game where you make choices, and you could take the virtuous path, or the Bible got one thing right, in that it is often easier to take the evil path. In the sense that the decision, while it may weigh heavy on you, it's the one of least resistance, but it's also the one with potentially greatest consequences, I'd say. But yeah, it is often, who doesn't like to be the bad guy, and who doesn't like to root for the bad guy sometimes in movies? It doesn't mean that you're an evil person who hopes that evil wins. I
think what he's saying, though, is that it offers a motive for the actions of the God of the Bible. This is really fun to be an evil God.
Yeah, if we are actually a game, then okay, it makes sense, but he's still a dick.
Right.
But I would just say, like, with the way I play, I mean, if I had the whole universe to my creation, I probably even wouldn't be as serene, as slow as it would be. I think it would be nothing but supernovas every 5 minutes, and on the planets, I don't know, I'd probably just make life and civilization and then just collapse it, just for my own pleasure, like judging from what I do in these games.
Magnifying glass at anthill.
Yeah. In that case, I hope if there is a God, he's not quite as big a dick as you would be.
Well, all right. I hope so too.
But you're probably a very nice human.
But only because I'm looking at it from this level. If I was outside, I'd be, ooh, blow them up again. That was fun.
Exactly.
Did you see when his head exploded? That was hilarious. It's the reason that we enjoy watching movies and stuff like that.
Sure.
It's a bit of fantasy. When I look at the various arguments for the existence of God, what baffles me more than the idea that there might be a God who is less than perfect, because many other cultures have had extremely flawed gods and multiple gods that had different flaws that were in competition. What baffles me most is that people don't seem to recognize what I consider to be painfully obvious. And the reason that it doesn't frustrate me completely is because I didn't recognize it either for the longest time. For the longest time, I would look at for example, the things in the Bible and say, oh yeah, that's moral and just, and this is a God. Look how much he loves us. He did this.
Yeah.
And it is all a matter of perspective. And until you remove yourself from these preconceptions that this is, no matter what you might suspect about it, it's necessarily good and just and virtuous. If you want, you have to distance yourself from that and say, let me analyze this as objectively as possible. This book advocates slavery. How do I feel about that? What does that mean? When I look at the Old Testament now, and I talked about this last night, it's almost a comedy. It is a book of this God character's continued failed attempts. I'm going to create humanity, and then it goes wrong, and then I'm going to fix it, and then it goes wrong, and then I'm going to fix it, and then it goes wrong, over and over and over again. It's almost laughable. But when you look at the moral character of both the deity presented in there and what he advocates and what he orders, and the characters. Somebody wrote me the other day about David and Bathsheba, saying that I don't want to get this wrong. He made a particular claim that David did something wrong, and then God punished him. David, basically stole another man's wife and had him killed after he knocked her up so that he could have her for himself, and God punished him. And my answer was, no, he didn't. What story did you read? What was the punishment? Oh, he killed the kid. He has an illegitimate kid with this woman, murders her husband so that she can be his wife, and God says, oh, that was wrong. For that, I'm going to kill your son. Now, parents out there are parents out there who will say, well, that would hurt worse than killing me.
Yeah, I'm sure it would.
Okay, fine. But what about the kid? Right. He just killed an innocent... Well, he didn't kill him. He took him home to be in heaven with it. Oh, bite me. You are making excuses over everything. David takes a census, and God doesn't punish David. He punishes everybody else.
Yeah.
David had like a stack of get-out-of-jail-free cards. I mean, it was incredible. This guy was just, whoop, I screwed up, but I got another one. Here you go. Here's another one. Let me off the hook. It's embarrassing. And I don't see... I really wish that I could find a way. I've tried every way I can think of. I hope somebody finds a way to get Christians to go, wow, this really is kind of immoral or wrong. But I don't know.
But you never will.
Yeah.
No.
It may never happen. We're never
They
definitely
just
not
fall
going to
back on
convince
that.
everybody.
We can't understand. That's
Yeah.
the default.
You're viewing it through sinful eyes.
And
Well,
it's like,
guess
well,
what?
if we can't judge whether it's good or not, why would we make the assumption that it's good? I mean, you're assuming it's good if you're going to sit there and say, I'm going to follow this God. So you're telling me that you believe that this is good, but you're telling me we can't judge it because we don't understand?
Yeah. A guy emailed the
Then
other day.
you don't know if it's good.
Yeah. A guy who emailed us the other day was basically explaining his belief, saying it's irrational. I don't have a good reason for it, but I can tell you that I have this personal relationship with God through Jesus. And I said, okay, how do you know it's Jesus? I mean, did you hear a voice? Did you see somebody? Or is this more of a feeling you have? And if it's a feeling you have, then by what reason do you attribute it to Jesus? I mean, if he didn't show up with like ID or something, what's really happening, and I'm not trying to be glib about this, is that someone has had some experience that they cannot understand and cannot explain, and they are then saying that, oh, somebody else told me that the reason for this experience is magical supernatural explanation X. Okay, that must be what it is. Since she's given me her testimony about this experience, and she thinks it's Jesus, right. So I'm going to think it's Jesus. And now every time I have this feeling, I'm reaffirming that I have some... By what reason do you make a claim about the source of the experience? Nobody has a good answer for that. And when this individual was like, I don't have a good answer for that. I've told you everything I can. Sorry. Well, okay, not good enough for me. I'm baffled as to why it's good enough for you. But anyway, I think we're going to try and get one more call in, but thanks a lot for calling.
All right.
Thanks.
You guys have a nice evening.
You too.
You too. There goes my phone.
I thought that was the 5-minute bell.
I'm betting that's Kathleen. Who's on? Or who are you calling?
We have Steve in Marina Del Rey, California.
Steve in Marina Del Rey, California. Are you on?
Steve in Marina Del Rey, California.
I hear you.
Are you on?
Hello?
Hello, Steve.
Marina Del Rey,
Turn the stream down or off.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about past lives and reincarnation.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of a book called Many Lives, Many Masters. It's by Brian Weiss. And it's about, reincarnation, past lives. And one of the, I realize that the issue is not necessarily tied in with atheism, but traditionally, I know that you don't believe in anything supernatural, so reincarnation would be something that I would consider supernatural. And one of the best arguments for it would be that they have these kids who are like 3 or 4, and they speak in languages that are like extinct, that there'd be no way that they could know it. I don't know if you've heard of anything like that.
I've heard a number of stories like this.
So what do you think of that?
I don't believe it.
You think it's totally false? The whole book is false?
I think he's making a statement on a specific claim.
I haven't read the book, and I don't have the ability to investigate the specific claims, but of the claims that I've seen investigated, they have turned out to be fraudulent in one way or the other, or unexplained. Now, most people are dissatisfied with that, and you should be, because if something's unexplained, well, okay, we'd like to explain it. To assert that the best possible explanation for this is that these people are reincarnations of some ancient person is, to me, completely unwarranted. It is basically a claim that you could not possibly be fooled, or that there could not be some other explanation, that you've investigated things to the extent that you're certain that this is the best answer.
It's exactly what you were saying before. On what grounds are you asserting this as the source?
Yeah. The best thing they can do is claim that X happened, and until they find out more,
And we don't know why.
the claim isn't believable. But I have seen examples where fraud's there. I apologize. We're completely out of time. Frank's posting the credits up there. We've got like just a few seconds left. John, if you want to go ahead and kill that, feel free to call back and talk about it another time, and maybe we'll do a show about,
or email us,
reincarnation. You can email tv@atheist-community.org. If you're in town, you can join us at Pluckers shortly. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back again next week. Take care.
Open this door, but don't walk through. Need a sun.